Hi, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy. This is part one of the analysis of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I was talking to some people about what I do on this website, and when I told them I'm going to be analyzing The Fall of the House of Usher, they said they don't write like that anymore. So let me start with this little introduction. They don't write like this anymore. And some of them, after you've read it with me, or if you started reading with me and then stopped reading with me and jumped to the analysis, go back and reread it. Pardon me. Just kidding. You should read it because before you make your final decision, this analysis is going to show you the power of language. The reason they don't write like this anymore is because people don't read like this anymore, which is unfortunate. Because the beauty of language, written language, is part of the thing that's getting lost through what's going on with technology around us. And the written language is really written to be read out loud because it becomes alive then. As Ezra Pound said, it's language charged with meaning. Okay, with that brief introduction, one of the reasons they don't write like this anymore is because this was written in 1839. And before you say, well, Jimmy, why should I read anything from 1839? Let me answer you, because this is classic literature and because it's literature, language charged with meaning. This is first-person narration, which means that the narrator's inside the story. And like us, he's subject to emotions, feelings, thoughts, ideas. Everything that can go right or wrong with a human being can go right or wrong with a first-person narrator, as we've seen in the literature that we've been studying. And that's important to understand when you read literature, either in the first or third person, because unlike the third person, who always must be believed, we really want to be careful when the first person is talking to us and pay very careful attention to what he's telling us, how he's telling us, which you'll see in the analysis of this story by Poe. So he starts out with a quote from the Beranger, and the quote is in French, and the quote I translated for you. And why would I do that? Well, you do that so you appreciate the story. Some narrators, writers do this. This is not the narrator narrating. This is actually Poe putting a quote here. The story begins here. The quote means his heart is a suspended lute. As soon as you touch it, it resonates. And here's a little background about who this guy was. He was a French poet. He lived 1780, 1840. Poe probably knew him, read him, enjoyed popularity in his lifetime, but failed into obscurity in the decades following his death. Of course he did. I never heard. Unless you read Poe. Anyway, so he puts that up there for a reason. And now that you read the story with me, if you read the whole story, you understand what they're talking about here, because Roderick Usher is very sensitive and can only hear certain types of music. You see? See how that works? The first sentence is 60 words. There's 60 words in the opening sentence. It's a lot of words. But as I told you before, when we analyze stories, the first page and the first sentence usually is very important in positioning the story in your mind. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to go over this first sentence. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day. Okay. Poe likes adjectives. The narrator likes adjectives. I want to say Poe, but it's really the narrator using adjectives, of course, written by Poe. There's usually sets of 3 adjectives. It's not one adjective, it's 3. This is a dull day, a dark day, and a soundless day. Why didn't I mark that dark? Here, whoops. I'm sorry. I'm not going to mark. You see it. In the autumn of the year, one of the things to consider in a story is that and it's complex because this is a first person narrator, but we know Poe wrote it. We know Lewis Carroll wrote it. We know people write stories, right? And so one of the things I want to bring to your attention now is that the author of the story, which I never talk about, I want to talk about only the story, but I'll only mention this one fact about an author. The author can choose to do whatever the heck he wants. He can choose to write any way he wants. He can choose to do in the story, lead the characters here, there, third, first, whatever, because he controls the story. So in this case, that autumn of the year could have been the spring of the year, but he chose autumn for a reason. Why? Because if you read the story with me, this is a very dark story. It's a complex web of Gothic horror, just very, very dark. It's not a happy story. Not a happy story. So he chose autumn. He could have chosen. Remember, he could choose any season he wants, and he chose autumn. So he's writing up when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens. And you've seen days like this if you live in the Chicago, Midwest, New York. Sometimes those clouds are so heavy, they're just oppressive, right? Not that you walked around when the clouds were low saying, the clouds hung oppressively low today. You don't talk like that. You don't write like that. You don't think like that, but maybe you should. I had been passing alone. Remember, he do whatever he wants on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country. Singularly dreary tract of country. Beautifully. And at length found myself, as the shades of evening grew on, within view of the melancholy House of Usher. Just a beautiful first sentence. Gorgeous. Melancholy is an adjective modifying the House of Usher. So we've got in the first sentence, the narrator showing up. He's first person. He's been writing alone on horseback, and he pulls up and he sees the House of Usher. Just sets the tone completely. So I know not how it was, but the first glimpse of the building, a sense of insufferable gloom. Gloom, you know what that is, sadness, right? Insufferable means you can't stand it, right? You can't stand it. Pervaded my spirit. Now notice that second sentence. It's short. We're going to talk about that later in the analysis, staccato and legato. So that's a 60-word opening with a short sentence after that. Just beautifully written. I don't know, but I was pervaded with insufferable gloom. Insufferable. And I say insufferable. Now he's going to tell us why he says it. Remember, the first person narrator is talking to us from inside the story. He's telling us this story. If you read the story with me, we never know the name of the narrator. I believe that. I don't think he's ever revealed it unless I missed it. So it's just the narrator. So now he's telling us why he says it's insufferable. This is one of the reasons that this is such a great piece of writing is that it's a conversation with us. This is a narrator talking directly to us. For the feeling was unrelieved by any of that half pleasurable because poetic sentiment with which the mind usually receives even the sternest natural images of the desolate or terrible. So in that next sentence, he's telling us that there's a certain half pleasurable, because it's poetic sentiment that you get when you're looking at desolate things. And that, I don't feel like that when I'm looking at a dead landscape, Jimmy. Well, maybe you should. One of the things we read is to learn how other people lead their lives, remember? Right? And how to lead ours, but also to admit to ourselves that sometimes this is true. If you've ever passed an accident and it's a horrible accident, or we're in an accident, or we're a witness to an accident, and it's not a good thing. And he's saying that it's half pleasurable because it's poetic when you look at desolate or sternest natural images, or terrible images. There's a certain truth in that. When you look at an accident and it's horrible, and you say, well, it's not me. There's a certain, you may not want to admit it, but it's true. You admit, it's not me. It didn't happen to me. So right from the beginning, this narrator is telling us that he's aware. He's very self-aware of himself as a person. And he understands looking at something terrible, it brings a certain amount. But not in this case. In this case, he's looking at the House of Usher, and he's not feeling anything such as, half pleasure. So he looks upon the scene and upon the mere house of the simple landscape features. He describes what he's looking at for us. Upon the bleak walls, the vacant eye-like windows, just beautiful adjectives, painting a picture with words. Well, Jimmy, can't he just draw the picture? Of course he could. But think about this. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? Well, if you don't have a picture, you better use 1,000 words to paint that picture. He's painting with words. Keep that in mind when we're reading this. The narrator is painting with words what he sees, because he doesn't have a camera. He doesn't have an iPhone. He's painting with words. So read the words slowly. When we read the story, we read it, and that's good, but it's good to go back and reread and picture in your mind what he's saying when he's saying it. The sentence I'm talking about has 80 words, not 60, 80. He's using 80 words to paint a scene in your mind of what he's looking at when he's looking at the House of Usher. An utter depression of soul, which I can only compare to no earthly sensation more properly than the after dream of a reveler upon opium, or the lapse into everyday life of the hideous dropping off of the veil. This is a very interesting sentence. As he describes the feature, the vacant eyelight, the rank edges, the desolation, he can't compare it to anything except the after dream of a reveler upon opium, or the bitter lapse into life after dropping off of the veil. What does that mean? Well, if you're saying that what a reveler upon opium, the after dream, it seems to me that you can have, if you've never used opium, you don't know what the hell he's talking about, which is okay, because we're not encouraging the use of opium. However, all of us understand what the dropping off of the veil, the lapse into everyday life, of the dropping off of the veil, of waking up from a dream, perhaps, or from a, you know what I'm saying? The reality has a way of really raising its head sometimes in front of us. I've used this analogy before about the good sergeant and bad sergeant in the movie Platoon, where the bad sergeant comes in and asks the people in the foxhole, the men in the foxhole, why are you smoking that stuff to escape reality? I'm reality. He was, because he controlled their life when they went out looking, for the Viet Cong. There was an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart. Think about that. Who talks like that? Who describes like that? But what an enormous image, an iciness, a sinking, a sickening of the heart, an unredeemed dreariness of thought, which no goading of the imagination could torture into aught of the sublime. He's been trying to bring himself out of it, but he can't do it. Right then and there, you should say, well, Jimmy, this is depressing. Well, sometimes reality is depressing, isn't it? Sometimes things happen. You get a bad diagnosis, with a doctor. Something is happening. So you get a sickening of your heart. Then he asks, what was it? I paused to think. I stopped. What was it that so unnerved me in the contemplation of the House of Usher? So he's very aware of himself, and he's asking, what is it about this thing? A couple of definitions here: sublime, such excellence; grandeur, sublime. He can't torture it into the sublime. He's trying to make it beautiful, but he can't do it. He can't do it. Okay. So what we have here is a narrator writing up to the House of Usher and feeling really weird. Now, isn't the way he wrote it better than what I just wrote as a summary? Something about it unnerved him or her. We don't know if it's a him or her. We're going to find out it's a him probably. Note the arrows and the meaning of the words that they point to. And then ask yourself about the quote at the beginning of the story and its implication with Roderick's music. So there's the first page. Let's continue. So it was insoluble. So he finishes the lesson. It was a mystery, all insoluble. Nor could I grapple with the shadowy fancies that crowded as I pondered. He can't solve the mystery. So he can't do it. So he was forced to fall on the unsatisfactory conclusion. Unsatisfactory conclusion. While beyond doubt, there are combinations of simple natural objects with the power thus affecting us, the analysis of this power lies in considerations beyond our depth. This guy is very self-aware, isn't he? He's very cognizant, aware of his feelings, why he feels what he feels, why he's thinking about what he's thinking about as he's looking at this scene. And he's just saying he can't solve the problem. But maybe he reflected, it's possible, different arrangements of the scene might produce something different, might annihilate the capacity for sorrowful impressions. And acting on this idea, he reins his horse to the brink of the black and lurid tarn. Tarn is a small mountain lake, right? It's a tarn that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling and gazed down with a shudder. He's looking into the still tarn. And you've seen this sometimes in lakes or rivers, sometimes when they stop flowing. If they stop, river usually doesn't stop flowing. Canal. But a lake, when it's totally like glass, that's what he's looking at in the tarn. It's a black and lurid tarn. Why is it black? Well, the oppressively low clouds. But he's looking at the tarn into the reflection, and he shudders even more thrilling. This is very interesting. He shudders even more thrilling than before. Why would you use the word thrilling if you're shuddering? Shudder means, right? But he's thrilled to shudder upon the remodeled and inverted image of the gray edge and ghastly tree stems and the vacant eye-like windows. There's eye-like windows. It's like it's alive. But he's looking at it in the reflection of the tarn. It's upside down, which is kind of eerie if you've ever looked at things like that, like a tree line on a lake, on a still lake. So nevertheless, in this mansion of gloom, it's a mansion of gloom, I propose to sojourn to stay a while. I got some notes on the bottom, okay? But sojourn, we're going to stay for some weeks. I now propose to myself. Will you marry me? That's not what that propose means. You know what it means. He's saying, I'm going to stay for a while with its proprietary, Roderick Usher, one of my boon companions in boyhood. So now we get an inclination that they were boys, right? He's a boy. How many years have elapsed since our last meeting? A letter had lately reached me in a distant part of the country. We never know where this takes place. We never know the country it takes place. We never know where in the world it takes place. We only have two names, Roderick Usher so far, and then we're going to meet his sister Madeline later on. We never know the narrators. So it's kind of there's a mystery all about this. You know, he's looking at a mansion that's just gloomy, But anyway, Roderick wrote him a letter and said, in a wild, impromptu nature, had admitted no other than a personal reply. So he couldn't write back because of what was in the letter, so he had to show up. The MS, the letter, gave evidence of nervous agitation. The writer spoke of an acute bodily illness, a mental disorder, that oppressed him. Earnest desire to see me as his best and indeed only personal friend. Roderick doesn't have any friends, and he's asking the narrator to come over. Right? He's got it's written nervously. He's nervous. And he wants him to come over to attempt by cheerfulness of my society some alleviations of his malady. It was the manner in which all this and much more was said, the way he wrote this, and the apparent heart that went with his request, which allowed me no room for hesitation. I cordially obeyed forthwith, and which I still considered a very singular summons. So we now know it's a he narrator. He couldn't respond by letter. It was written such a way that he had to go personally. Why is that? So apparently many years have passed between when they were companions, but the way Roderick wrote it made the narrator just say, I gotta jump on my horse and get my butt over there to cheer Roderick up. Or was there something else going on here, why he had to show up? We've already got some interesting clues here about him shuddering more, even more thrilling when he's looking at the tarn. So this guy, this narrator, is not afraid, or is afraid, or he's not afraid to be shuddering. He's got to go see what's going on. He's a curious fellow. Although as boys we had even been intimate associates, I really knew little about my friend. Can you be intimate and not know a person? Maybe. I was aware that his ancient family had been noted time out of mind for peculiar sensibility of temperament. This sentence here is 69 words. You're going to see these numbers pop up every now and then. I'm giving you word counts on purpose. I'm giving you word counts to appreciate the language. Okay? Peculiar sensibility of temperament, long ago in many works of exalted art, manifested of late in repeated deeds of munificent and unobtrusive charity, as well as passionate devotion, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So his family has been known for doing these things, Orthodox, it's all right? He knows a little bit about the family, recognized beauties, music. So there's an interest here of getting his butt out there because this guy's an interesting guy. He's not just Tom, Dick, or Harriet. He's an interesting guy with an ancient family. He's got roots, right? Even more than the Orthodox. I had learned, too, of a very remarkable fact that the stem, this is what he learned, the stem of the Usher race, all-time honored, right, as it was, had put forth no period of any enduring branch. If you know anything about branches, we all go to those websites now to find out who, where we're from, all that. By the way, Jimmy's never done that. Jimmy really doesn't really care about that. There's no enduring stem. In other words, the entire family lay direct line of descent and had always, with very trifling, very temporary soul. So there's no direct descendants. Which brings up another interesting twist, that the narrator's running over there to cheer his friend up when the letter was written. Maybe, I'm not saying this is true. But when it's first-person narration, we have to consider all the possibilities of the narrator, since the narrator's a human, like us. So if you got a letter like this, there's no heirs in this family, and there's only a direct line, and all this about the family. Maybe you get out there to say, well, maybe there's something in it for me. I don't know. Doesn't say. I'm just saying. It was this deficiency I considered. There it is. It was this deficiency I considered. while running over the thought and perfect keeping of the character of the premises with the accredited character of the people, while acting, blah, 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 blah. It was this deficiency, he sidetracks here, perhaps of collateral issue, and the consequent undeviating transmission from sire to son of the patrimony with the name, which had at length so identified the two as to merge the original title of the estate with the House of Usher, an appellation which seemed to include in the minds of the peasantry who used it both the family and the family mansion. That's 123 words to talk about the deficiency, Usher's deficiency of a straight line descent, and how the House of Usher came to be known as the House of Usher. Usher's house. I said the sole effect of the somewhat childish experiment of looking into the tarn had been to deepen the first singular impression. There could be no doubt the consciousness of the rapid increase of my superstition. Ladies and gentlemen, the word superstition is an interesting choice of words by the narrator. He's telling us he had an experiment. He's looking at the reversed image in the air, and an increase in my superstition. And then he goes, for why should I not term it so? Served mainly to accelerate the increase itself. It made him more shuddering, right? He's long known a paradoxical law of the sentiments having terror as its basis. There's that staccato sentence, right? Short sentence. There's a paradox. A paradox is a statement opposed to common sense. A paradoxical law of all sentiments having terror as its basis. There's something paradoxical about terror. It frightens, and yet it pleases. That's something to think about. It might have been for this reason only when I lifted my eyes to the house again in the image of the pool, and there grew in my mind a strange fancy. I'm not saying this guy's on drugs. I'm just saying that this guy is very self-aware of what he's doing. He's looking at the tarn, he's looking at the house, and the fancy is so ridiculous. I'm only mentioning it to show the vivid force of the sensations which oppressed me. He's only telling us this because what? They're so forceful, these impressions. And what is it? He worked his imagination to really believe that the whole mansion, there hung an atmosphere in their immediate vicinity, an atmosphere that had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which reeked up from the decayed trees, the gray wall, the silent tarn. A pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. Whoa! This guy is painting a picture for us not only of what he sees, but how he sees it. He's telling us how he sees this and how he himself looks at the house, looks at the tarn, comes back and shudders even more. It's just beautiful. The beauty of mystic vapor. It's not even the air. It's something else coming from the decayed trees and gray walls and the tarn. Something magical, something mystical, something evil. That's what I'm reading. You can disagree with me and email me, but that's what I'm saying. This guy is potent with words. Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream. See, he knows something's, oh God. And you get lost sometimes in thought. You're looking at something, your gaze, your gaze settles on something and you start daydreaming and going off, right? Well, people don't act like that, Jimmy. Really? Really? Have you watched people? Even today, have you watched people? Just watch them sometimes. I scanned the more narrowly the real aspect of the building. So when he says this, the real aspect, pardon me, does that mean what he was looking at was not real? There's a tint of that. If it's not real, where's it coming from? It's coming from his mind. The mind is a most powerful thing. And this guy is painting a picture in his mind of the House of Usher and how he got there. We know how he got there. He, responded to the letter. But now he's going to describe us, which is just powerful language. And, I don't have to read it all here. Minute fungi overspread. Yet all of this was just read it for yourself. No portion of the masonry had fallen. It's still it's this there. And there appeared a wild inconsistency between the parts of the crumbling condition, right? We're going to stop there as he's describing for us the reality. Why does the narrator say the writer when talking about his boyhood friend Usher? Why does he say that? Talks about his boyfriend, the writer. Can you be intimate without knowing? These are some questions to ask yourself. Now, we talked about the lineage of Usher going only, one line. Bananas. Bananas are a lot like Usher. It's the largest plant. Now, I know you're going to say, Jimmy, where'd you pull this fact out of? Well, I happened to read a great book. I could reach over there. Hold on a second. Let me go reach for my book. Hold on. Okay. I should have had this out. It's called The Fish That Ate the Whale. It's a great book if you get a chance to read it. It's about the Banana King. It's a wonderful story. It's about America's Banana King, the life and times of his name was Samuel Zamora. Samuel Zamora. Zamora. It's a good story. It's a good business book if you're into business. Bananas are a lot like Usher. It's the largest plant in the world, but it's not a tree. Did you know that? It's an herb. It doesn't produce seeds. Did you know that? I think you did. It grows from cuttings. So while very uniform, it's hard to find a bad banana. Sorry. So they all look alike, don't they? But there's a danger. If a parasite or disease mutates and kills one banana, it will eventually kill all the members of the species. This is a very interesting fact. Did you know that? That's why they got to be, bananas are so prevalent because, they're they grow only in certain places in the world. Israel is one of them. But you have to, it's a tropical plant, obviously, right? It's not going to grow in Chicago or New York. But like Usher, there are no enduring branches. There's no branches of bananas. There's just one branch, which is a sad thing. This is Jimmy. You've been reading with Jimmy. This is the first part of 3-part analysis of the House of Usher. Email me, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Stay with this. This is a beautiful story, actually, and it's very rich, very powerful. And we're learning about the narrator as he goes to visit his buddy, Roderick. Thanks for stopping by.